to the Central Church podcast. My name is Brooke, and here with me today I have Bruce Kalmes. And Bruce, before we get going too far into this podcast, I would love for you to just tell everyone a little bit about you.
Sure. My name is Bruce Kalmes. I'm a father of 4, a grandfather of 5. I've been married to my wife, Ellie, for 22 years now. For work, I'm currently with the Home Depot, and I've been with them for 17 years now, the last 9 of which have been spent as a store manager. My family and I came to Central Church about 6.5 years ago accepting an invitation from my son to attend the soccer camp. And really had no idea what saying yes to that invitation would mean for both myself and my family.
Right.
Quite an experience after that.
Well, awesome. We love you. We love your family. And thank you for just speaking with me on here today. And we're excited to hear your thoughts on this topic. So again, thanks for joining me, Bruce.
You're welcome.
And today we have a really interesting topic. Before we were recording, I was talking to Bruce about just how we don't really get to talk about this topic very often. So we're eager just to dive into it a little bit today. And that's discussing what it's like to have a Jesus-like confidence. And maybe you've never even thought about that before, but often within the Christian community, we speak of the necessity of humility, which is very true. It's so important to be humble. Romans 12:3 says to not think of ourselves more highly than we ought. But the warning here was to not overestimate our abilities and capacities. The question was never about our worth, though. And I think we often kind of misunderstand this to mean we should think very little of ourselves. But God gives us a purpose, and He gives us worth, and He wants us to live this big life for His glory. And Jesus set this perfect example for us of doing this. He was this strong and confident leader, yet at the same time, He didn't have a hint of false pride or arrogance. And that Jesus-like confidence that He showed can still be reflected in our lives today. We also see after Jesus died in the Bible, another example of His disciples just kind of stepping into this confidence that they saw through their leader, their teacher of Jesus. And that's when Peter and John, Jesus's disciples, were before the Sanhedrin, this religious governing body. And we read in Acts 4, it says, when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men must have been with Jesus. And later on it says, Peter and John say, as for us, we cannot help but speaking about what we have seen and heard. And I just love this. I love that these, completely ordinary men were able to just boldly and confidently speak before this very intimidating body of leaders, and that's because they had this confidence that came from Jesus. And, they weren't being arrogant or prideful. They were just being confident. And I think, we can still mimic that in a way today. And if there's anyone today that I can think of that embodies this kind of humble confidence that Jesus showed us, it's Bruce, displaying how just humility and confidence are not contradictory. So Bruce, could you just kind of speak into this? What this might look like day in and day out, especially as a leader within your work and a leader within the church? How do you kind of strike a balance of the two here?
Yeah, I guess, so my journey as a leader throughout my life has been an interesting one. For a long time, and I've made mention of this in my community group often, before I was following Christ, I really had the impression that I was driving the school bus, and I was in charge of where I was going. And after I became a follower of Jesus, and I began realizing the things that God has put me through and prepared me through by the situations that I was placed in, really realized that all those things were not placed there for my well-being or my glory or my good or gain, but really to prepare me for what God has planned for me in the situations that He intended to use me for. And not until I really surrendered my life and gave it to Jesus did those things really become evident. And this year has been quite a test for anybody in a leadership role, I think.
Definitely.
No matter what a lot of us have gone through, there wasn't really anything that would prepare us for the amount of comfort and decisions and change that we were going to be facing. And some people have been this great desire to be led, and the world really doesn't know, in a lot of cases, where to turn. Some people are being led by fear, and others are being led by crowds in the streets, and praying that people will also be led by His church and His word. It's really a difficult balance in this environment that we're in right now.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you said about you're being led by something, and so who are you looking to for your direction? And we can look to His word and His truth, and it definitely gives us the ability to be confident for sure. Yeah, and I think it's really important, though, as we're saying, that you can be confident, that you can be bold and courageous as you're making these decisions, like you said, which has been difficult for sure. It's important that we also kind of we have to attempt to kind of keep our pride and arrogance in check. We can only have this confidence like Jesus if that is also true, if we are being fully humble. And I think to do that, there's a couple things that have to happen. But first, like you mentioned earlier, we have to give God all the credit. I loved what you said earlier about, before you were following Jesus, you thought all of these things in your life, were for your own gain. But that definitely shifts when you become a follower of Jesus, and that's when you start to acknowledge that all of these gifts come from Him, for His glory. And we read in James 1:17 that says, "Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows." I just love that. I think it should give us a lot of peace. But our talents and our time and any other blessing that God chooses to give to us is to make much of Him and not of ourselves. So Bruce, how would you say that we can give God the glory? What could this look like in your life?
Well, giving God the glory is something my wife and I discuss frequently. We look at the gifts that God has given to us, both physical gifts and gifts of the Spirit and abilities. And we talk often about how those gifts, aren't for us, but they're to help serve help serve others and serve God with. We talk about our home, for instance, that we're so blessed to have, and it's not really our home; it's God's home, and we use that to help serve by hosting community groups and other things. It's if I would have had to look in the last 6 months or so, if I were relying on my own abilities, not the ones that God had given me, things would have turned out so well. My confidence comes really in a few ways, both my belief and my willingness to serve God and submit to His plan, and that confidence of knowing that the Holy Spirit is there to provide the words for me in situations that I'm placed in. It's never me, and by giving Him that praise and that glory for giving me the opportunity to be in those situations, and relying on the confidence that you know that He's never not going to equip you with what you need to get through that conversation or that situation, is really what carries me through those times where if I relied on myself, it would be a very uncertain, moment.
Yeah, there's so many things that you just said there that I think are really good and important to note. One, even like physical things that we don't think of as blessings from God, that I think it's very normal to think, like I worked hard and I earned the money that I used to buy my house. But like you said, that is a blessing from God, and when we acknowledge that, that shifts the glory from ourselves to Him. And it's so important to see that distinction, like you were talking about, and using any and every blessing that He has given to us for His glory, like your home for groups and just ministering to people, and the abilities that He has placed on you. And I think that's so important, and that is what is going to bring God glory. And so, whoever's listening right now, like Bruce mentioned, you have gifts and abilities in more ways than one. And when you use that for Him, that is, I think, a very practical way of giving Him glory whenever you use it to serve Him and His church. So thank you for saying that. I think that's really important to note. And, I think another part of this that we have to talk about is to make sure that we always think of others as greater than ourselves, which is hard to do as a human. So it requires it's a constant choice that we have to make. And we read in Philippians 2:3-4, it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should not only look to your own interest, but also to the interest of others." And that really is what you were talking about earlier too. This putting of the interest of others above yourself is an important part of this confident leader. That is what's going to allow people to feel comfortable to come to you. If you were this leader that was fully confident and bold, but yet didn't practice this care and valuing of others, that wouldn't be that reflection of Jesus that we see. They would be intimidated, and it would just be a false sense of pride. But I'd love to just hear your thoughts on how do you think this valuing of others keeps that pride and arrogance at bay?
Well, I think we had no better teacher than Jesus to show us how to handle situations like that. And again, we've all fallen short of the glory of God, and none of us are better than any others in the sinful nature of our lives. And arrogance and pride are something that I went a round or two with in my life in the ring throughout my years. And remembering that fact that none of us are better than the other. And in order to serve somebody, we need to be lower and lead and interact with each other with very large helpings of grace and of love and of truth. And I think when those three things are your focuses, that it helps that process really serving somebody for God and for His glory, and not for our own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that um, that service piece. Like you're speaking into. Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but that is a giant part of this leadership. Of serving others, and of course, if we're valuing others, we're going to serve them with what you said. With truth and love and grace. Um, that that is a huge piece of valuing others. It's kind of like walking the walk, so to speak. We can say that we care about others and want to lead them well, but then when we don't serve them in that way, then we're not really doing that. So yeah, that makes total sense. Um, well, Bruce, just thank you so much for all that you said, and I love getting to talk to you about this because God wants us to lead this courageous, bold life, and He created us to bring Him glory, to confidently move forward with who He created us to be. And as you know, that is an entire life's pursuit. We're not going to get it right away, but I think, I see you and your wife's life that just desire to keep moving in that direction, to have that confidence of this is who He created us to be. And we're not perfect at all, but we're going to keep moving towards that goal of being like Jesus. Like you said, He gave us the perfect example of how to be and how to lead. And I just thank you for speaking about that, and more so just for showing that in your lives across the church.
One thing I do want to just close with real quick, and my wife Ellie and I were discussing earlier today this sermon that she was listening to by Dr. David Jeremiah. And he came up with a quote that I think this kind of summarizes this whole discussion that we've had, kind of leads to what you said in the very beginning. But the quote is not to think less of ourselves, but to think of ourselves less. And that focus, keep that focus on the Lord and the person that you're serving, not yourself. But as you stated in the beginning, it's not really a matter of self-worth, to keep the focus off of us and on Him and them.
Right. Yeah. That is the perfect summation of this. Yeah, it's not a question of worth. It's just of where our priorities lie. Yeah, definitely. She was very timely with that sermon.
Yeah, it wasn't odd how that happens.
Well, just thank you so much. And I hope just everyone listening just heard what we had to say, and just will take one piece of it at least, and think about that more and pray about it more. And before we say goodbye completely, I would love to just pray for everyone listening right now. So if you join me, Bruce, and anyone else listening, God, God, we love you. We thank you that you sent your Son for us, to lead this life as fully man and fully God, and as He did that, He gave us such a perfect example of how to love you and how to love others. And I just pray, whether we're a leader or not, you have called us to, like Bruce said, to not think of ourselves as less, but to think of ourselves less. And that is so true. And I just pray that you would help people to shift our priorities to what you want them to be, and that we would just find confidence and boldness through you, and confidence in who you created us to be, so that we can bring you glory and honor, God. And we just love you, and we thank you. In your name I pray. Amen. Well, thank you again. And to everyone listening, you can join us again in 2 weeks for another episode. Have a great day.